My name is Ruben. From my dress, you may suppose that I am one of the ancient Jewish people. But I am not. I'm a man of old Samaria. For hundreds of years before my time, the children of my country taught to hate and to despise the Jewish race. But, for myself, I owe a great debt to one of these neighbouring countrymen of mine. A debt that I can never repay. This is why I want to tell you about myself. I come from a wealthy Samaritan family. As I grew to man's estate, the blessings of God were multiplied upon me 1,000-fold. When Ruth, the lovely daughter of the priest, became my wife, the 2 sons God granted us are beautiful boys, healthy and of good mind and spirit, a joy to their mother and a great pride to me. Then one day, it all came to an end. It wasn't a great calamity, or violent hurricane, or raging fire, or overwhelming flood, but simply a small spot on the flesh of my hand. A spot that would not heal. I said, "It is nothing, it does not matter," and I hid it and showed it to no one. But I could not hide my fear any longer, and at last, because I could not sleep, I went to the temple to show my father-in-law, the priest. Surely he would know what to do about it. He greeted me kindly, but as he examined my hand and the red spot upon it, an overwhelming sorrow came upon him, and he hid his face from me. Then he called another priest, and together they examined my hand. They shook their long grey beards over it, and they took me to a small room beside the temple wall where I was to stay. My father-in-law said, "I shall tell Ruth that unexpected business has detained you, and that you shall be away from home for a time. By then, we shall know." 14 days I spent in that lonely little room. 14 days of mourning, of wild weeping and desperate praying that God would spare me of this. But he did not. And before long, I knew. And so too did my father-in-law. He took me to the outer gate, and there we paused. "Will you see Ruth again?" asked my father-in-law. "No," I said. "I shall take the path down through the vineyard and down through the olive orchard. From there I can easily reach the highway beyond the house, and no one shall know that I have passed." Because our hearts were heavy, the way seemed rough and long. The sun beat hot upon us, but a cool breeze stirred our garments, and the ripening grapes filled the air with a delicate fragrance, for it would soon be the vintage time, but I would not be there. Never again would I join my fellow men in work and song, and in rejoicing for the blessings of God. As I thought of these things, an overwhelming sorrow fell black and bitter upon my spirit, that I did not hear the soft murmur of voices and song that was carried upon the breeze until it was too late. For Ruth, weary of my long absence, had come with the children into the sunshine of the orchard and sat under the shade of a tree. We stopped and tried to prevent them from seeing us, but my son was too quick. His bright eyes caught the movement from behind him, and he came running. "Father! Father!" he called, as he came running straight for my arms. My father-in-law stepped in between us and caught the boy and carried him away. He was bewildered and struggling, As Ruth gathered the little one into her arms, she rose to come to me. Then, seeing my face, she hesitated. My heart died within me as I drew the corner of my robe over my face and cried, "Unclean! Unclean!" The love in her eyes changed to dawning horror and fear as she stood there, clutching the little ones to her breast. Then she turned and ran, stumbling along the path as she went. I could hear the sound of her sobbing, carrying upon the breeze. And I was left alone, unclean. I will not weary you with the telling of my suffering for the next few months. You all know the laws of our time concerning the leper, how we were forbidden to enter any town or approach any person save those afflicted as we were ourselves. We lived in the caves in the hot and barren mountains or among the graves. We were the living dead among the truly dead. I wandered alone those first few months. I could not endure the sight of my fellow sufferers. The knowledge that in a short time, a few years, I too would be as they, emaciated, blinded, perhaps crippled, wretched, misery, without hope. No, it was too incredible. It could not happen to me. Surely God would lift this curse and restore me to health and my loved ones, as Elisha of long ago had healed the Syrian leper. But even as I stood there, my heart could not deny the dreadful fact that there was no Elisha in Samaria, nor in Israel, and there hadn't been for hundreds of years. Then one day, I came upon a group who was strolling along a path. There were 9 of them. And as they first passed me, I looked at them in astonishment. I would have let them pass unnoticed, had it not been for the last among them. He was old and crippled, and leaned upon a staff. And as he tried to run to keep up with the others, his staff broke from beneath his weight, and he fell almost at my feet. He cried out for the others to wait for him, but they did not. In compassion, I lifted the old man to his feet. "May God reward you," he sobbed. "Hurry, quickly. We must reach the highway. He is there, and we must see him before he passes." So urgent was his desire, and so heavily did he lean upon me, that I did not have the opportunity to ask who it was he desired to see, or why it was of such great importance. So we hurried over the hill to the highway, and there upon the highway was a great crowd. And standing apart from them were the other 8 who had hurried so. Their voices could be regularly heard as they agonizingly chanted, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us! Jesus, Master, have mercy on us!" Just as we reached them, the man upon the highway to whom the crowds were so attentive raised his hand, and the voices about him quieted. He called out to us, "Go, show yourselves unto the priest." Then he turned from us, and the multitude pressed about him once again. We stood and looked at one another. "To the priest," said one, "what have I to show the priest, save my blinded eye and my leprous skin?" But the old man who had leaned so heavily upon me said simply, "I go." As he went, he leaned no more. His back was straight, and his limbs carried him swiftly and surely. And so too the others were healed, and new life flowed through their veins. They began to run and leap and shout, laughing with each other over the lifting of their curse. They hurried off to tell the priests and their loved ones. And I too felt the miracle of newborn health within me. A great sigh escaped my lips. I thought of Ruth and my pretty little ones, and the joy that this undeserved blessing would bring them. I had not looked for this blessing. I had not looked for this cleansing. I knew little of Jesus of Nazareth and believed less, but I must know more of him now. Truly this must be God. Truly this is God, and I must worship him and thank him and offer him my heart. I hurried back to the highway, but he had gone. A short time later I caught up with him, for the multitudes pressed about him and hindered him from making a great distance. I pushed my way through the crowds, no longer having to stay apart from them, for I was now clean. I shouted, and the people moved aside, for I could no longer restrain myself. I shouted aloud and gave thanks and glory to God. As I reached Jesus, I fell at his feet and poured out my thanks and devotion before him. Jesus looked about him and said, "Were there not 10 cleansed? But where are the other 9? Is there only this one who was returned to give glory to God? Only this stranger?" Then he lifted me to my feet and placed his hand in blessing upon me and said, "Arise, go thy way, thy faith hath made thee whole." So because he bade me, I went my way. I was declared clean by the priests. But I did not return to Ruth or my boys immediately, for my task must be accomplished first. I must tell others of what Christ has done for me. And I must find the other 9 who did not return to give glory to God. Were there not 10 cleansed? Jesus asked. Should not all return to give glory to God? I do not know these men, and I received their common blessing by the merest accident. But they must be found. Are there, perhaps, those among us here today who receive the blessing of God, but have not fallen at his feet in gratitude? Are some of those 9 here among us today?